which is called The Estates.
Mm-hmm.
This is a cutesy-looking auction game that is actually, at its core, one of the meanest auction games I've played in a long time. We had a chance to play this at B3GD, and the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because Damien has been talking this one up for me a long time, and he knows me, and he knows what sorts of games I'm in. He's like, dude, you've got to play The Estates because it would be right up your alley. And I've got to say, right off the get-go, boy, howdy was it. Was I right with 2016?
No, sorry,
I think I was right with 2016.
I'm checking something else.
You're
but
checking.
yeah.
Checking the other game. That's
Yeah.
right. Anyway, very good. Without going out too much into, boring what this game is. At its core, it is an auction game where we are auctioning off buildings and we're creating skyscrapers in basically 3 separate streets.
Yes.
In this game. This game is brutal for 2 reasons. One, you can go into negative points, and you very easily will go into negative points because there is a lot of hate picking and hate bidding in this game. The other thing that makes this game mean is it is a once auction. So what that means is that in terms of your auction, it doesn't keep going around. The person who picks the thing that we're auctioning off, they get last bid, and everyone else gets one shot at getting it. So the person to the left of the player who picked the building that we're auctioning off, they get one shot. And if someone outbids them, too bad. You have to wait for the next round to go. These sorts of games are great for people who love to get in each other's way. So at its core, the way that the control over these streets work, which is that the streets have 4 buildings that need to be completed, 4 or 5 that need 4 buildings that need to be completed at its core. And to complete a building, you have to build a foundation level, and then at some point you have to put a roof on that building to signify that it is winning. Here's where the rub comes into it, which is the person who controls the building is the person who has the top number of that building. So the cubes come in 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Very simple. Those are the numbers. The lowest number, the foundation number, every number above it must be lower. So if I put a 5 on the bottom, a 4, 3, or 2, or 1 can go on top of it, so on and so forth. But there's nothing stopping someone putting a 1 directly on top of the 6, on top of the 5, and just going, you know what, no one else can put anything to this building. I'm going to be in control of the building.
Yep.
Now, that sounds good. You're like, well, that's good. That's 6 points, No, because the only way that it's worth positive points is if your street gets completed. And your street gets completed by having 4 completed buildings in it. So a completed building must have a roof on it.
Yeah, yep.
Now, there are also some buildings as well that are built on sand pits, essentially, so you can only have 1 cube in it. But what it ends up doing is it's a double-edged sword because you're like going, hey, sweet, I'm going to get points if this completes. Yes, but you've now told everyone that you're committed to this street at least for 1 building and for however many points. So currently it's worth negative points until that row is completed. And at its core, that's the whole game. We also have the other thing I should mention is that the economy is a closed economy. So that means everyone starts with $12, $12 million, and all of your increments are in $1 million. And when the auction finishes, the auctioneer has 2 choices. They are either allowed to accept your bid and take your money and allow you to build whatever it is, or they can go, you know what? I don't think that bid was good enough, and I'm actually going to pay you the money that you were going to pay me, and I'm going to build it for myself. Yeah. It becomes very important because in this game, the cubes, the colors of the cubes, there are 6 of them. The very first person to build a color of that cube, they now become the CEO of that color for the rest of the game. And so that means people know, well, hey guys, I'm going to auction off this number 2 right now. And Damo is on not a lot of money right now because he stupidly bid very high on something on the last round. So that means I can win this auction very easily, take Damo's cube and put him on negative points in somewhere he really doesn't want to get. And this is where the game starts to really turn into the mean game we're talking about. I haven't even talked about the other things that you can auction off, such as the mayor's hat, which doubles the points, positive or negative. So people can go, you know what, stuff it, that row's now worth double negative points. Stuff you, right? Yeah. Or the fact that you can auction off these barriers which extend the street. So what was once a completed row is now needs an extra 3 buildings. Yeah. Or there's not many more things to talk about other than Damo. This game You were right. It is super mean, but my God, we were laughing at so much during this game.
Yeah, my favorite thing in the game is to watch someone clearly want something, and everyone knows they want it, but because they're to the right of the person who
has the most money,
or actually the person who started the auction,
yeah,
and they went low, and the person who then started the auction went, no, that's far too low.
That's
Now it's going to cost you, and then to watch them pay them to place a cube that you know that person wanted in the most ridiculous spot ever, and you go, well, that's absolutely going to be negative points now. And then you just stare and going, how do I get myself out of this hole? It's a game where I have played it, and a winner has been on -8 points, and they won the game because no streets got finished.
Yeah.
So all the cubes went out, and like nothing got finished because we were just obnoxiously mean to each other. I've played a game where there was just this huge disparity in points because one of the last plays was that someone put the mayor's hat out, and then the very last play, someone else, the person who needed to win this roof, they ran out of money, and they couldn't afford the roof. They couldn't outbid someone, so quite literally, they went from a winning position to coming last by a long, long way.
Was that Stu?
No, in this case it wasn't.
No, our friend Stu, he basically got handed the most expensive building on the first completed building, and we all went, right, well, that street's never getting finished.
That was it. And that's the sort of game that it is. Now, I will say, so first of all, it was 2018, not 2016.
Close.
And it's not a game for everyone.
No, it's really not.
It is the auction game. In terms of like pure mechanics, what makes it really interesting is it's that thing where you can go around the table and everyone has one auction, and it's not the only game to do that.
James and I just played Container at PlayCon.
Yeah.
And it does the exact same
That's
thing.
right. But
I have to admit, I love that mechanic.
Yeah.
It's like, no, sorry guys, you can't just screw me over. If I've got the money, sorry.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, and what Nee means by that is that the actual person who started the auction can then purchase for the amount that was auctioned for.
Yeah.
Goa does it as well. It's really funny. There was a period sort of like in the, I think around sort of the early 2010s sort of thing, a little bit later. Well, that was a pretty common mechanic, and we don't see it as often these days.
It is a pretty mean mechanic.
It is very mean, though.
Because it requires, I love how you said in the estates rulebook, it's like you're allowed to talk about what the bid that would be accepted.
Yeah.
And so like we'd start the auction, and it'd be like, well, I certainly wouldn't accept it for 5 money, but maybe 6 money. And then the bid got around. It's like, yeah, okay, I bid 6 money. No, that's way too low. That's way too low a bid. I'm going to buy that for 6 money.
And the last thing to say is that, yes, it is a closed economy, but you still can manipulate it because you can embezzle your own money.
I love that theme of the game.
Your turn. And granted, and like for every embezzled dollar or $1 million, again, because the denominations are in per million, that you embezzle, yes, it's worth a point at the end of the game.
But it's $1 out of the economy.
It's $1 out of the economy, and that's huge.
Well, we played a 5-player game, so that was 60. Like that's 60 million, or 60 units of currency, right?
I'm pretty sure 5 is the max player count as well.
Yeah, so we were playing it at max, right?
Yeah.
But like if you're playing it at 4, that's 48 units.
Yeah.
That's like you take 1 out of it, and it can mean the difference between a 6 or a 7 and these things. And I will agree with you. Like this game, I can see is definitely not for everyone because it is mean. It is that game of like, why did you put that there? Because I thought it was funny. Yeah. Well, that's mean. It's like, yeah, it kind of is, but that's kind of the game. But so long as everyone goes into the game knowing that it's a bit mean.
Yeah, look, there was one point. There was one point where Stu looked at me and he had put a bid in, and he wanted that cube, but he had no money. And I looked at him and said, "That's not enough." And he goes, "I know that's not enough. And I know where that cube's going to."
Yeah.
And I just outbid him. And it was funny. So it was our friend James. He was on his side of the auction, and he's looked at me. He goes, "I know where you're going to put that cube, so I'm not even going to give you the money for it. You can give me the money for it."
Yeah.
I paid him money and then just put the cube in the most ridiculous spot, just so.
But I remember you did that as well. But then James was like, "Why did you put that there?" Because it was funny. Yeah. And then there was one moment where James was convinced I was going to bid on a cube. So convinced I was going to do it. I just went, "No, I'm not going to bid on that." He's like, "Why would you not bid on that?" Because I don't care. And he's like, but why would you not bid on it? Because I'm like, well, and it ended up it didn't really matter at the end of the game. Like I was on -8, and Stu was on like -28 or -30 or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it was like, again, it was a great game. It's really it's one of those. It's like the half-size boxes, so it's a lot of game for what you get put into it. I do love that not every cube. So there's 6 colors with 6 cubes, right?
Yeah.
So 6 through 1. Not every cube is in play, and you can't pick any cube. You have to pick from the outsides in of this stack of cubes.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really good mechanic because not everything's always in play, so it changes up what is going to come out, when they're going to come out, what's actually got value, what doesn't have value. But at its core, this is actually a very fun game. It took only about 45 minutes to an hour, so it's actually got a decent chunk to it, but it is mean. It can be one of those games where if you get through an hour and you feel like you've just been absolutely hammered on for an hour, that could potentially happen.
I will say, like, if you're the type of gamer that likes to sit there and just focus on your own stuff, you don't like anyone messing with your own stuff, and look, don't get me wrong, that's awesome. There are times that I really like. There are a lot of games like that I like. The Estates is not that. The Estates like thrives with table talk and stuff like that. It definitely fits our group. It's like the Estates is, albeit very, very different games. If you're someone who likes coup, who likes just the sort of games that produce a ton of table talk, this is absolutely.
This was all table. This is just all table talk. But that's why it's so good.
And it's just slinging, just slinging rubbish at each other. It's brilliant. But even though, yes, I'm saying like it's all about table talk, it's all about just slinging rubbish at each other. The game itself is absolutely solid.
Yeah. At its core, it's very solid.
It's very, very solid. It makes a lot of sense. It's a tiny rule set, ton of game.
Yeah.
With high interaction. Brilliant. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, look, we recommend it as a podcast, as a group. We do give it the good old thumbs up. We are actually trying to do something at the moment with the podcast. We are trying to come up with a rating system of how we would like to review games. We're not a review channel. However, we do think it is important for you at home to kind of understand where we feel these games are.
Yep.
So we are looking for I don't want to, like a Board Game Gateway recommends some variation. Like, who knows? Maybe like a Nat 20 or something. Maybe something dice related because our logo. But yeah, that doesn't work because we have a 6-sided dice and a 20-sided dice. Anyway, point being, we give it a big recommend.
Yep.
We think it's really great. It is not for everyone, but if you are someone who likes to mess with your friends and have high interactivity with your games, this is absolutely wonderful.
I will say though is that if anyone out there is looking for a really interesting and fun auction game that's not as mean, can be a little bit mean, but certainly not as mean as the Estates, but still has a brilliant auction mechanism, is maybe insular is the wrong word, because it certainly isn't insular, but it's more about I need to focus on my thing. But there's still a little bit of worrying about what other people are doing. Check out Ra. We've spoken about Ra on this podcast before.
You did a feature on it.
It still has its own unique auction mechanic. It is different, but at the same time, at its core, it still is an auction game where you are trying to auction for things to improve your board state, to improve your point score. Or Medici. Medici is another one. Again, both of those games by Rainer Knizia. In my opinion, the master of auction games. But both Ra and Medici, they give you interesting variations on the auction mechanic. But again, neither of them are the Estate. The Estate is very much a... I'm going to get a few mates around. We're going to have a bit of fun, and we're going to see how far we can go before
we shaft each other.
Yeah, before we shaft each other, basically.
Right. Well, it gives it a big thumbs up. And so that was the Estates.